Hello, my name is Jordy Izzard. I'm the Director of Global Alumni Relations, and I'm here today with Stephen Stull from the class of 1969, who's here celebrating his 50th reunion from SAIS. We're so glad to have you back. Today's date is October 25th, 2019, and we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation, and I will start with what originally brought you to SAIS.
Well, thank you, Jody. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's certainly a pleasure to be back for this reunion. Been here a couple of times since I graduated, but it's good to come back and see the changes that have happened. What brought me here? I was always interested in traveling in different cultures. You know, my father used to regale us with his stories of how he had traveled and done a student abroad, a cruise afloat, a student afloat, and he went different places, which all sounded so exciting. And I started, after undergraduate, I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years plus, and that got me to, that gave me some traveling, certainly international exposure. I was in Okinawa and then on in Vietnam. But it wasn't the sort of international experience I was really looking for, given the purpose of being in the military, and especially at that time. So I was interested to go to SAIS and get some education and some direction in terms of international studies and be able to leverage that and get into business or be able to do something international.
That's great.
So
good.
No, it was good, and I don't regret it.
That's actually a good segue into my next question,
okay.
Which is, tell us what your memories are of being a student here.
Oh my. Well, I still have some good memories. They haven't completely faded. I think what was interesting at the time, one of the things that struck me, is I was interested in East Asia, Southeast Asia. And at the time, and I assume it's still the case, you need to have a proficiency in a foreign language. And I had taken French in high school and college and the military, and so that was sort of the default language. I never was very good at it. And they said, well, look, if you're in an area of studies, and I was interested in East Asia, Southeast Asia, then we're going to try to offer a language in that region. And there were 5 of us, and we thought that was a great idea. They said, well, we'd like to take Chinese or Japanese. And they said, you know, forget about it, because you have to have a certain level of proficiency, a level 2, reading, writing, and speaking. And the chances of you achieving that in Chinese or Japanese and doing your coursework are pretty slim. So you got a choice of either Indonesian or Urdu. And the vote was 3-2 for Indonesian, which worked out very well, because that basically got me into my career and into my first assignments with Citibank after college. So that was certainly one of my strongest impressions. Other than that, I mean, it was an interesting time, given the war. Mm-hmm. And given all the activity in opposition. I didn't really see much of that here at SAIS. I think one time, and I don't know, I was talking with a classmate, whether it was 68 or 69, I'm not sure, there was some sort of a protest. I mean, very mild, nothing dramatic. And the net effect is that they canceled classes for the day, so it was all to the good at the time. But that was it. I mean, there really wasn't much pushback. I certainly didn't have any animosity toward me. So those are some of my memories.
And tell us, when you graduated from SAIS in
Yep.
1969,
Yep.
tell us what kind of was your career trajectory? What did you plan to do, and how did it turn out?
Well, I wanted to go internationally, and I wanted to do it in the private sector. I figured that would be more interesting and maybe less bureaucratic than government sector. At the time, it seemed oil companies and some banks were hiring internationally. So there wasn't a wide choice. Fortunately, I didn't know much about oil and didn't know anything about banking. But Citibank at the time, then it was First National Citibank, they were expanding their international branch network. So they were looking for people that could join the bank, and after some training in finance and accounting, then you'd be able to go overseas, because they were opening branches and they needed to have people that they could assign there. So that was great. Other banks I looked at, they said, well, after 2 or 3 years in the domestic network, well, then maybe we can assign you overseas. So First National City Bank at the time just seemed like there was, no question. So I joined them, started with them, I think in June of '69, and basically 6 months later we were in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So after some basic coursework and work in head office in New York, and again making sure we had some adequate knowledge of accounting and corporate finance, and make sure that we looked right and we were going to fit in, they packed us off. So I went to Kuala Lumpur, was there for about 6 months, getting all settled. They used to say, as soon as you put the drapes up, they reassign you. And that was literally the case, is that we were in a rented house, got some drapes up, and they said, you're going to Jakarta. And what was funny is our neighbors were English, and they'd been around Southeast Asia and South Asia for a while. And this one woman would say, oh, I've been here, I've been to India, I've been there, but, oh my goodness, I wouldn't want to go to Jakarta. And I just told my wife that day that, yeah, we're going to Jakarta. So she said, okay. So off we went. It was certainly more primitive than it is now, but it was exciting. We were down there in Jakarta for 2 years, and then went to the Philippines, in Manila, and then basically spent 8 years in East Asia, mostly Southeast Asia. Went to Guam, which is a bit of an anomaly for international banking, and then went to Seoul, Korea. So it was an interesting mix, but it was kind of time.
Moved your way up, yeah.
Moved our way up, yeah, and then the next stop was back to New York. I think it was time to come back to the States and try. We had children and try to get them back and experience the United States. So, so that was basically it. It got me overseas, even though it was an industry I wasn't familiar with. It's one I certainly have enjoyed, because there was a variety of experiences professionally as well as culturally, dealing with different customers in different industries. So that was good. Basically, from the banking experience, I segued into management consulting to other banks as part of the correspondent banking group, the financial institutions group. But then we were not living overseas, but I was traveling, so I'd be away from home and go out for a few weeks, primarily working Southeast Asia, because that's where I had my contacts, and doing consulting through the branch with local banks in those countries. And basically that was my trajectory, doing consulting to financial institutions with consulting firms. I ended up with Bearing Point, which was doing USAID projects. So that was sort of the last phase of my work experience. I was working on USAID projects with Bearing Point, later with Deloitte Consulting, first in Bosnia, which was, again, it was a banking and business finance project, and then to Afghanistan in 2003, working in the central bank, basically helping to resurrect the central bank and commercial banking in Afghanistan. Was there through 2009, back 2011, and 2013. My final project, my final work with Deloitte Consulting was doing a USAID project in Islamabad, Pakistan. So basically ended my international work experience in the fall of 2014.
Wow.
So it was good. It
Long
was good
ago.
fun.
Yeah, that's great.
Good run.
Super. Well, after your illustrious career and having had maybe 5 years of not working to reflect, what advice, now looking back, would you give to a current SAIS student today?
Well, it's always a little difficult or maybe treacherous to give advice to others, but I know, looking back and how could I have drawn more out of it? Certainly, I was interested in the courses. Just maximize the experience in terms of opportunities to learn and draw. Be active and draw from the professors, which I think nowadays that's not a problem for students. Now that would be it. Just take advantage of the opportunity to really get as much as you can out of it. Not just the degree so you can move on, but what the ideas.
Great.
thought, the contacts, the network. So
Thank
yeah.
you. Well, thank you for your time today, and we just
Well,
hope
thank
you
you.
enjoy your reunion and
So far,
have a
I have.
wonderful time. And thanks so much for being here today.
Okay, thank you.